Hey, so I just saw this video by LAHWF. I don't know how you meant to say it. LAHWF? I don't know. Andrew Hales is the man, the interviewer, and he has on an expert homicide called Jeff, who I'm trying to find his surname right now, but I can't find it. I'm sure he'll say it in the beginning anyway. Now, I'm not going to do the whole video on this, but this video is very strange. Normally, Andrew's videos I'm actually into. I actually like a lot of this stuff. I've watched a bunch of them. Some of them are more questionable than others, but I think Andrew is actually quite a good interviewer, and he's only going to get better as he goes along, so you know, he's going to have to learn. But this is something he's going to have to learn, and something that I think he should do is get slightly more educated on the facts, because sometimes you get shit like this, where this guy's come on as a homicide expert, but he basically just barefaced lies. Either he barefaced lies, or he just actually is not an expert whatsoever, ever, because I don't know how an expert on homicide could ever say the things that he's saying right now. And you'll understand what I'm getting at when we get into the video, and I'll debunk him as we go. So let's get
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks so much for being here. You're an expert on homicide.
Correct. Yeah.
Homicide? How do I say it?
Homicide.
Homicide.
I just have to mention, Andrew always gets shit wrong. He says things wrong. I don't know if he's doing that on purpose or not, but it just seems to be like a running gag.
How'd you get into that?
Sure. I went to school for geography.
Okay.
And my senior year of college, I took a class, very last semester, called GIS for Crime Analysis. In crime investigation, you can use that to map out the epidemiology of different crimes. You can use it to map out where different burglaries are happening. You know.
Right. So this guy is a surveyor of where murders are taking place in terms of like data and stuff like that. But literally, basically, just where they are happening, and then using like. Say, for instance, they have a bird's eye view of a crime scene. He can then apply his geography skills to try and help the forensics team, like understand what was going on. Were they coming up from this road, going down here? Was there marks over there? Did they go off that way? Blah 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 blah. Did they enter the house through this route or over that wall? Or blah blah blah. You know, they're figuring out. He helps them figure out and put a picture together of what people were kind of doing. And if there was any extra evidence that would help from a geographical point of view or whatever. Also, it just helps to map out, just for any other investigators as well, if you just map an area anyway. So, yeah.
Now, it's common in finding different homicide clusters within cities.
Okay. So that's how you kind of got into this.
Right.
So this is why I feel like he's lying, because he knows that there's clusters, right? He can map out where many things might be happening in certain areas, and he knows full well if there are certain areas that are more blackly populated, if that's the right way to put it. But like, come on, we all know that exists. So he must know that if he is going through data, and he must know that there are certain disparities there. But he says some pretty fucking crazy shit in a second. So
I started out as a GIS intern at the Center for Homicide Research.
Yeah, and that's in Michigan.
It's in Minnesota.
Minnesota,
right?
Where you live,
right?
How many years have you worked there?
2 years.
Homicide.
So he's an expert in 2 years. Like, I would consider an expert on homicide to be somebody who's been working within the profession for maybe over a decade and has basically seen it all and done it all and has a pretty good fucking hold on what being an investigator into homicide really means. I wouldn't trust this lad who's kind of like fresh out of college, worked on a few projects. You know, I just think like he's got experience, but he's not an expert. You know, so that's number one mistake, Andrew. Is not an expert on homicide.
That's just murder, right? It's kind of a vague thing that covers manslaughter and a bunch of terms.
Correct. Yeah.
What do you mostly study? Just murder?
Yep. So All the above. So we focused really on criminal homicides and justifiable homicides in our databases.
Like self-defense.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that would include first-degree homicide, second-degree homicide, felony homicide, which is any homicide committed in the commission of a felony. So if you go rob a bank and an older lady has a heart attack because you're scaring her, you will be charged and likely convicted of a homicide.
So he's aware of all the different categories for data when it comes down to homicides, right? He can break it all down. But watch what he does soon, because it's interesting, like how he conveniently forgets about race. There's every other category under the sun, but race somehow... in fact, he completely lies about race in relation to homicides. So, you know, this guy is pretty brave to be coming out here pretending to be an expert and giving completely false information. I don't know who sent this guy, but this is pretty fucking bad.
Okay.
In that instance.
Right.
And then, of course, justifiable. A lot of law enforcement shootings are considered justifiable. Not all, as we've obviously heard with police shootings.
That's a big thing right now.
It is, yeah. Absolutely.
So now we're going to get into the first bit of crazy shit that he tries to pull with police shootings.
What's your, I guess, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. Do you subscribe to any of those?
Personally, I support Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
Boom. Okay. Strap yourselves in.
Right. And the reason...
Yeah, I don't have a stance on it. Like,
Clever. Clever to take that stance, because as an interviewer you should be fairly neutral for the audience. So well done, Andrew, for picking up on that. But also you have to kind of let your interviewee hang themselves with their own noose, kind of a thing. So
I don't know if I should or shouldn't have a stance or what.
build their own gallows.
It's okay to not have a stance on it.
Like, you're saying the police are abusing their privilege a little bit?
I'd say some of them are.
Their power,
and I think that's a pretty critical difference, is that we...
And I will say at this point I do agree. There are definitely always going to be bad apples that get into positions of power that abuse it. It's unavoidable. It happens all the time. And the more that we can safeguard against that, the better, obviously. It's just finding the ways to do it, because it's very difficult. You know, when you're dealing with humans who deceive, manipulate, and do so at a high level, it's very difficult for most people who just want to be trusting and whatever to understand what might be going on. So you've really got to, you know, it's very difficult territory to get into. But on this point, I do agree. I'm more in favour of this bit. But things take a bit of a turn.
Sort of have this tendency to lump everyone into groups. You know, we think that all police are abusing their power. Well, my dad was a police officer for 18 years, and he never abused his power. He never took...
Or at least that's what he told you, mate. I bet he has, like, 30 black bodies, like, buried under the fucking... under the floorboards. Just like... Yeah, he never
things too far. And then he re-enlisted in the military, and now he's staff sergeant in the military.
Cool story, bro.
And most police officers are good people who want to serve their communities, right?
Yeah, sure. I actually agree with that part too.
Right. It's generalizing, yeah.
Exactly. But then there are those handful of individuals that shouldn't be police officers and who abuse their power.
Wait, so is that statistic tendency towards black people, it's not even debatable anymore?
It's factually known, yeah.
Okay.
We know that 60% of police homicides are against black individuals, even though they only make up, I think it was 13% of the population.
Right, okay, so this is where we're getting into the situation where he's giving completely and utterly false information. And we're going to debunk him very calmly. So here we have a board from Statista. It's number of people shot to death by police in the United States in the 2017-2018 as of June by race. So by this gives 2017. This column gives... Oh, I've just switched 2018 off. Okay, I didn't even realize you could do that, but here we go. We're going to go by 2017 because that's a full year. We are not a full year from 2018. That's just up till June. So, because that's inconclusive data for a whole year, I'd prefer to go 2017. But from the trends of 2018, it looks like to be kind of a similar. We're looking at a similar ballpark here. Now, I added all this up because he said it was 60% of people. Now, if you can see here, white people make up the most, and black people make up the second most. Hispanics just after that in third, and then unknown, and then other. Right? So, I mean, in a way, they could potentially even be lumped together in a way. I don't know, actually, because at least you know what the races are with the other, but they're just other for now, because there's not too many of them. Probably just Asians and stuff. But, like, whites make up the most here. So I added all these up to get the percentages of how many people were being killed for what reason. So, when I looked it up, white people make up 46.3% of all the homicides, and because if you look here, that's 456.98. So that's 457 is the number. That's the closest percentile to what we would say for the percentage of white people killed. Oh, sorry, you can't see, can you? I'll move this down here. But yeah, 437%, 46.3%, sorry, of 987 is 456.98. So if you look at blacks, that's something closer to 22.6%, 223.06. That is the closest you can get to that number in a percentile. So he just said 60% of police homicides are against black people, while they are only 13% of the population. This shows, Statista shows, one of the most reliable sources of data on the internet, shows that 22.6% of blacks in a year, last year, were killed by police. So that is a wildly inaccurate statement that he just said. Also, most of the people killed by police were male. So this also is kind of like something to consider, is that nearly all the police homicides were male. So most of these would have been black men that would be being killed. So we're talking about less than 13% of the population. So they are overrepresented, but we're going to look at why they're overrepresented later. But black people are overrepresented in terms of the victims of police shootings, but not by the margin of what he is saying. Now he also doesn't give the reason why either, which is very telling, because he should be in the know generally speaking. So we'll bring him back over here now so we can see his face properly. Right then.
And so there is the disproportionality there, that black people are more likely to be impacted by police violence. Now again, police violence is rare, but when it does happen, it is disproportionately impacting certain groups of people.
No, but it is in terms of like how they're doing it. But like if you look at like the population though of oh yeah, by the way, the Washington Post also backs up Statista's data as well, by the way. And if you go through it, you will find that yes, when it comes down to it, essentially like it basically found the same thing as Statista, so there's no need to go on to it, but I just wanted to show that this is backed up elsewhere as well. But we got what are we going on? So okay, so let's watch a little bit more of the video, and then we'll get into why blacks are overrepresented in these areas.
Yeah, and black people, but also indigenous people, Native Americans.
Minorities, Native American, okay.
I would say really specifically black individuals.
Oh yeah, no. Let's wait. Actually, before we do that, let's. I just want to show the population. No, the number of blacks in America. So yeah, blacks are 12.1% of the population apparently. So by 2010, they're saying it's 42 million people. So 200, if Statista is correct, and 223 black people were killed by police the year before, that is like less than 1% of people are being killed. It's even in the 0 decimals. So they're acting like it's a bigger issue than what it is as well. And like even for white people, even though they are killed more, they are even more of the population. They're like hundreds of millions. So they're again with them, like, you know, all lives matter, and we should be looking out for police brutality, of course, you know, especially when it's unjustified, yes. But to act like it's the big problem that should be looked at is really, really ridiculous, because it's actually largely to do with it's largely a symptom of a bigger problem with violence in general between people that the police have to be involved in. So, realistically, we need to be talking about black on black crime and crime within white communities and stuff like that if we ever want to bring those numbers down. Realistically, it's the only solution, and it's not the solution that they tried to bring up in the rest of this video.
Individuals and indigenous folks.
Native Americans.
Right. When you say minorities, you know, you're sort of lumping all minorities in there. And although I would say minorities as a whole do face more discrimination by police, it's not as factually known as black people and indigenous folks.
Okay.
You know.
So no one debates that. Like everyone knows that on both sides, I guess.
I mean, in the research community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
No, and if he's trying to claim that when I've literally just debunked him, like, yeah, he's completely either lying or he's just got an agenda or something. Like, but this guy is really twisting the facts.
No, but people will of course debate, you know, because there is sort of this tug of war between agendas, and so, you know, people hear Black Lives Matter and they hear it as Black Lives Only Matter.
I honestly feel like he was sent here by Black Lives Matter. I feel like he's some kind of little, like, white-faced robot that they put together. It's like, we're going to convert white people to Black Lives Matter through this guy just telling, like, making ridiculous claims about, like, how the state is, like, completely oppressing and, like, killing black people all left, right, and center. 60%. You know what I mean? It's crazy. Like it's I don't know why the fuck he's here, but you made a mistake with this guy, and you should have probably done a little research. There's nothing wrong with pretending to be the everyman as an interviewer, but it's healthy to actually read up on the things that you are going to be doing and the people you're going to be speaking to, because if you didn't know that statistic, like if you didn't even look at stuff like this, then all of this stuff you're just going to take at face value, and you're going to have a completely warped sense of reality. So just watch out for that.
Matter instead of Black Lives Matter too, you know. But
Right.
again, that's my personal stance. That's not the stance of the Center for Homicide Research.
Well,
Yeah, no, and so it shouldn't be. And I'm surprised that they've even took you on, because you're obviously incompetent.
it makes sense just for everyone to just say all lives matter.
It would if it weren't for the fact that All Lives Matter came out as a direct challenge to Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
Well, that's because Black Lives Matter were calling for reparations for black people, special treatments for black people, power for black people that would put them above white people. Like, it's all in their manifestos. There was a lot of videos made about it. They made a manifesto and stuff like that. They were as well defending criminals, like people who were not unarmed, people who were fighting with police and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a good look for Black Lives Matter, like when they're going around saying like fucking kill police, you know, and stuff like that, which they were doing. And they also incited some people into actually going out and killing police, actually. They incited a lot of riots that destroyed a lot of black neighborhoods. You know, this group, like, you know, who was saying all lives matter, well, yeah, they're kind of do encapsulate black lives. Like, the other black lives that are being ruined by these people's behaviour, you know what I mean? Like, that they care about that because it's fucked up. They shouldn't be doing that. And, you know, so until Black Lives... And this has been said by other people, but until Black Lives matter to other black lives, then there's not going to be no change. None of this change is going to come whatsoever.
And so, you know, if we're saying all lives matter, does that not include black lives?
Yeah.
Does that not include black people? Does it not include indigenous individuals?
Yeah, so why be against it then?
Well,
And
no.
so,
Well, I mean, all people. Wouldn't it include black people? All lives matter.
it would, yeah, if it weren't for the fact that it were created in direct opposition to the idea of Black Lives Matter. I would say that the Black Lives Matter movement came about to bring awareness to a very real statistic, and that statistic is that black people are disproportionately impacted by that small percentage of bad police that choose to police in a way that is less than ethical, right?
Right. How do we fix that?
So he's trying to say that the police are unethical, but how do you know that they're always, like, because he said in the beginning of this video that most of the time police killings are justifiable. So how, like, realistic, but he's also generalizing about the killings as a whole. So, like, realistically, it's not, they're making a mountain out of a molehill, like, in some respects. Like, I know that, like, someone's life is not a molehill, I get that, but, like, what I mean is that they're talking about it as if it's, like, a genocide going on. And we're talking about a very few handful of cops doing this kind of shit, and a very few amount of people being affected by it. They're talking about it as if it's so completely systematic, that it's so widespread that it's like, you know, people being exterminated in fucking Nazi Germany or something, which is like complete. It's just not the same at all in terms of anything, any comparison.
I would say different hiring practices could do a lot. In Minnesota, for example,
Okay, yeah.
we have a requirement that you need a 2-year and 4-year degree. What we're finding, though, is that a lot of individuals that could be good police are locked out because they may not have a degree.
So he's basically making the argument now that, like, one of the better ways to hire people is people without degrees into police, so that, like, they have, like, a broader pool to take from. And in some ways I agree with him, but what I think he's going to find is that, like, a lot of people who don't have degrees, who may come from more impoverished backgrounds, who may come from cultures that glorify violence and other things like that, which don't necessarily have to be black people, by the way. Like, it could be, like, anyone from that kind of thing. Because there's people like that in Britain who are, like, white or travellers and stuff like that. There's all... These things exist in different ways all around the world. But what I'm getting at here is if you just let any Tom, Dick and Harry into your... I'm sure you'd still have a process as the police. But if you start to degrade the quality of police officers into the forces, then you're going to see a degrade in how the police force operates with this kind of stuff. So, you know, you could even end up seeing, you know, more people who go into this, like, trying to be the good person, end up being twisted by the fact they have to be confronted with reality and get frustrated with dealing with lots of bullshit they didn't have to deal with before, and maybe killing people because of it, because it builds prejudices between different groups or whatever when you have to deal with them more often than others. So that's what we're going to get into now, is because his solution is to have different hiring practices for police in order to, like, weed out the bad eggs. But I would say, realistically, we need to just heal the black home. I think that's the main issue, and it's the thing that the Conservatives have been talking about for a while, and I think it's something that is actually genuinely the actual answer. So, do black Americans commit more crime? This is from Channel 4 Fact Check. and I'm not going to read all of it. But we're going to get into some analysis. So, you know, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, black offenders committed 2% of homicides recorded in the data between 1980 and 2008. Only 45% of these offenders were white. Homicide is a broader category than murder, but that's not split hairs. But yeah, like, I think this number has slightly increased and this number slightly decreased now that we're close to 10 years on from this. I have seen other stats that were from after this, I'm pretty sure. So, I just didn't find them for this video. I wanted to get a couple of different sources for different things, but this will do for now because it's a rough. I don't think it's changed drastically. But so 93% of black victims were killed by blacks, and 84% of white victims were killed by whites, which means a greater portion of them were killed also by people who are not white, like blacks, probably. You know, let's face it. And probably Hispanic gang members and stuff. So, alternative statistics from the FBI are more up to date, but include many crimes where the killer's race is not recorded, so that's kind of a bit annoying. What else did they say? That also it's backed up by something else. Academics have noted that the proportion of black suspects arrested by the police tends to match closely the proportion of offenders identified as black by victims in the National Crime Victimization Survey. So, you know, it does seem to reflect reality, you know. So yeah, it doesn't support the idea that police are unfairly discriminating against black people. And the reason they give here is because of poverty, and then they also say that it's very difficult to get as impoverished white communities to study to see if the effects are the same. But that's bullshit, and we all know it's bullshit because you've got all those trailer parks and stuff like that in America where there's high levels of poverty, just very comparable to blacks. And they could easily study that if they wanted to, the rate of violence, which I'm sure is higher than the average population. But I do wonder if it is quite as high as in the black community. I have my doubts on that one. So, next headline, this comes from The Conversation. Gun violence in the US kills more black people and urban dwellers. An American is 25 times more likely to be fatally shot than anywhere else. Where was the one about black people? So here we go. Here's some interesting stuff. So the rate of death by gun homicide for black people exceeds those among whites in all 50 states, but there is tremendous variation in the magnitude of this disparity. In 2015, a black person living in Wisconsin was 26 times more likely to be fatally shot than a white person in that state. At the same time, a black person in Arizona was only 3.2 times more likely than a white person to be killed by a gun. So, obviously, very different gun laws, I imagine, in these states. I would also imagine very different amounts of black people in these states, and I would also imagine different levels of poverty, like the relative poverty for a black person in Arizona may be a lot less for Wisconsin. I'm not sure on that. I'm just shooting the breeze here, but like that, those would be the kinds of things that I would be thinking about when it comes to why that might be happening. Also, as well, if there is a higher propensity in Arizona for black families to be two-parent families and middle class. So, you know, not to say that there wouldn't be some, maybe slightly more poverty for black people in Arizona than white people on a general scale, but that largely they're living fairly equally in Arizona. So the combination of being black and living in an urban area is even more deadly. In 2015, the black homicide rate for urban areas in Missouri was higher than the total death rate from any cause in New York State. So they're saying that it's to do with different levels of disadvantage among white and black Americans differ sharply by state. For example, Wisconsin, the state with the highest disparity between black and white. Fire homicide rates. It has the second highest gap of any state between black and white incarceration rates, and the second highest gap between black and white unemployment rates. So, racial disparities in advantage translates as racial blah 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 blah. So, Wisconsin, is that a Democrat state? Wisconsin Democrats. So Democrats have flipped their 44th legislative seat since the 2016 election, tonight, taking over a Republican-held state Senate seat in northwest Wisconsin. So Democrats have now taken over Wisconsin, it seems. So Wisconsin. I'm gonna just search it as a state, and then if statehood. So where is Wisconsin? Oh, it's up here. So it's been Republican for a long time, I imagine then. So progressive Republicans in Wisconsin created the nation's first comprehensive statewide primary election system, first effective workplace injury compensation law, first state income tax. So the Conservatives were actually like a bit like leftists, actually. They created the first unemployment compensation program in the United States. So they created the first welfare. Progressive Republicans. In the immediate aftermath of World War II. I mean, actually, that's quite interesting now that I think about it, because the Republicans were the people who wanted to abolish slavery. They were also the people who were like fighting for minority rights and stuff like that. Republicans, yeah, that's pretty crazy actually, that they were doing that. Okay, well, at least in Wisconsin anyway. Wisconsin took part in several political extremes. Alright. Oh, so they were against the communist stuff. Oh wow, they did the welfare reform. Okay, so I was kind of intrigued to see if it was Democrat. I've been kind of pleasantly surprised here that Wisconsin has actually been mainly Republican and has only recently fallen into the Democratic hands. But it has quite a large divide between blacks and whites. It's quite interesting. Although it's also kind of interested in the sense that the type of Republicans that happened to reside in Wisconsin had fairly left-wing ideals. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so maybe I've jumped the gun a little bit on Wisconsin here, but I was considering that it could have been because I do understand that a lot of democratic states and cities do tend to suffer under democratic rule. They do tend to suffer a lot with violence and the disparities between poverty and all the rest. Although I guess maybe that is just a theme in America as a whole. The next thing we're going to talk about is famicide, because there's a part in this video which I can't be asked to go back to because this guy is just deplorable, really. But there's another part in the video where he says that white people commit the most mass shootings. Now, in fact, he also says, though, that mass shootings happen to be mainly famicides. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder who's committing all the famicides. Now, of course, a large portion, upwards of 50% of all mass shootings are famicides. So, I went into the Bureau of Justice Statistics for the USA to find out what they're saying about the issue. And it turns out that white people commit 56.6% of all the famicides, and black people commit 39.9%, or close to 40% of all the famicides in the country. Now that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because and also, if they are male, 71% of them are male. So I'd say, like, most of the people that are doing this are male, okay? So, most of the mass shootings are done by white people, he was correct. However, he is not bringing up the fact that the population of America's white people is 77.35%. So, as a representation, they're actually underrepresented in their stats. So they are committing less crime in proportion to their population. It's either fairly in line or under the percentage of thingy. So there you have that. So that's basically means like 50%, 60% of all famicides were done by white people, and so that means like a very small percentage of white people committing them. However, 39.9% of black people are committing famicide. Now, if they're mostly men, then we're talking about a population of 12.1% of the population are black people, apparently. Making it 14%, sorry, I read that wrong. 14% of the population are black. So let's say roughly 7% of them are men. Just for argument's sake, although I don't know exactly what percentage of them are men. But let's say 7% of them are men. They are committing 40% of the famicide. So that is kind of crazy, right? That is kind of crazy that proportion of famicide is coming from such a small portion of the population. So it really does bring into question a lot of things. And what really bothered me about this video with this guy who's an expert is that he comes on talking about Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, like giving it all Johnny Big Boy, and it, in all honesty, is fabricated, and it really is just... I just find it kind of disgusting that he thinks this is okay to... I don't know if what he's trying to pull here. Like honestly, he should be fired for spreading false information. Like, if you come from the place that is meant to be researching these things, I'm sorry, but you can't be coming out here and saying that 60% of police homicides are against black people when it's 20%, and then you can't also be coming in here pretending to be an expert, talking about ways to fix problems with the black community, and not even mention the propensity for black homicides, famicides, etc. This is obviously a very big problem in their community, and he has not addressed it whatsoever, even though he's sitting there going like, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter so much to me. You obviously don't give a shit. You obviously don't give a fucking shit, and honestly, you're a scumbag. You should really fuck his out. He's a fucking snake oil salesman. That's what he is. This guy. There needs to be a stop put to it because it's really out of order. But yeah, I don't want to do any more of the video. He goes on to say some other shit which I can't be arsed debunking. But like, I just wanted to show, like, if you watch this video, you will see how manipulative he is here, because he's giving completely false statements, and Andrew's completely taken in by it and just kind of goes along with it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know actually. He might just be doing it as an interview tactic, but it just I don't know. It's just it's just bullshit. A lot of it is bullshit, and you know, just take more care in future, I would say. Because you're just spreading misinformation at this point. So thanks for tuning in, guys. We debunked this guy pretty hard, I think. And, yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Give us a like and subscribe. Sorry. Sorry I've been a bit rambly today. I'm a little hungover, so just bear with me. Bear with me. But yeah, thanks again. I'll see you around.